The first time my son-in-law mentioned my Lake Simcoe cottage, I thought he was admiring the view. I had no idea he was calculating its value. The lake was perfectly still that Saturday morning. Mist drifted across the water as I sat on the old wooden dock with a cup of black coffee. My wife, Patricia, used to say mornings like this were worth more than money. She'd been gone for almost 3 years. Yet every summer I still opened the cottage exactly the way we always had. Same porch swing, same flower boxes, same blue canoe tied to the dock. Every corner reminded me of her. This wasn't just another property. It was 41 years, fishing trips, anniversaries, and Christmases spent watching snow fall across the frozen lake. One day I hoped my grandchildren would build their own memories here. That afternoon, my daughter Melissa and her husband Ryan arrived for lunch. The grandchildren ran straight to the beach. Ryan stayed behind. He walked slowly around the property, stopping every few minutes to look at the shoreline. "Property values around here have exploded," he finally said. I smiled. "So I've heard." He nodded. "This place has to be worth at least $2 million now." I shrugged. "I've never asked." He laughed. "You really should." I didn't answer. Patricia and I had never measured the cottage by dollars, only by memories. Lunch was pleasant. Mostly. Ryan kept steering every conversation toward business, interest rates, real estate, investment opportunities. I listened politely. After dessert, Melissa took the kids to collect seashells along the shore. Ryan looked around to make sure we were alone. "There's actually something I wanted to ask you." I set my coffee down. "What is it?" "My construction company has a chance to land the biggest contract we've ever seen." "Congratulations." "Thanks. The bank likes the numbers." "So what's the problem?" "They want additional collateral." I slowly nodded. "I see." He smiled confidently. "I was hoping you'd consider using the cottage." For several seconds, I thought I'd misunderstood him. "The cottage? Just as security. You'd still own it. It's only paperwork." I looked out across the lake. The same lake where Patricia had taught our daughter to swim. The same dock where she'd told me she was pregnant. The same porch where we'd celebrated our 40th anniversary. Ryan continued talking. "If everything goes according to plan, the bank removes the lien in 2 years. And if it doesn't?" His smile faded slightly. "It will." "That's not what I asked." He hesitated. "The bank could force a sale." There it was. The sentence he'd been trying not to say. I looked directly at him. "So you're asking me to risk the one place my wife loved most? For your business?" "It's not a risk. Every business loan is a risk." He didn't answer. A few minutes later, Melissa returned. Ryan acted as though nothing had happened. He laughed with the children, helped clean the table, played catch on the lawn, but my mind stayed on one sentence. "It's only paperwork." Late that evening, after everyone left, I walked into the bedroom Patricia and I had shared for decades. On her bedside table sat the framed photograph from our final summer together. I picked it up. "You always could read people better than I could," I whispered. As I placed the photo back down, I noticed a small notebook tucked behind the frame. I frowned. I didn't remember ever seeing it before. Across the front, in Patricia's handwriting, were 6 words. "If anyone ever asks about the cottage." I stood in the bedroom for a long time, staring at Patricia's notebook. She had always written everything down. Shopping lists, vacation plans, birthday ideas. But this notebook was different. The pages were numbered, dated, organized, almost like she had expected someone would eventually need to read it. I carried it downstairs and sat in my favorite chair by the fireplace. The first page read, "Richard, if you're reading this, someone has finally asked about the cottage." A smile crossed my face. Even after all these years, she still knew me better than anyone. "You'll probably think they're only talking about business. Please don't answer right away. Read everything first." I turned the page. Patricia had written about our very first summer on Lake Simcoe. We had bought the cottage when we were both in our 30s. Back then, it wasn't worth much. Most people wanted newer homes closer to the city, but she loved this place. She believed memories appreciated faster than real estate. I laughed softly. That sounded exactly like her. Several pages later, her handwriting became more serious. "One day someone may see this cottage as an asset instead of a home. When that happens, remember what we've always promised each other. Never risk tomorrow's family memories for today's financial opportunity." I closed the notebook for a moment. Those words stayed with me. The next morning I called Melissa. "Morning, Dad. Could you stop by after work? Everything okay?" "I just want to talk." "Of course." That evening she arrived alone. No Ryan. "He's meeting with investors." I nodded. We sat on the back porch overlooking the lake. For several minutes neither of us spoke. Finally I asked, "Did you know Ryan planned to ask about the cottage?" She looked surprised. "He told you? Yesterday?" She lowered her eyes. "He mentioned it to me a few weeks ago. And I told him I didn't think you'd agree, so you knew." She nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." I could see the guilt on her face. "Melissa." "Yes?" "Does Ryan's company really need collateral?" She hesitated, long enough to answer my question without saying a word. "I don't know everything, but he said the bank became nervous after one of the projects went over budget." "How far over?" "I don't know." Again, another hesitation. She knew more than she wanted to admit. That evening, after she left, I called an old friend, George Reynolds. We had practiced law together decades earlier before he became an estate attorney. "Richard, it's been too long." "It has. I need some advice." "About what? My cottage?" There was a brief silence. Then George asked a question I wasn't expecting. "Has someone asked you to use it as collateral?" I blinked. "How did you know?" He chuckled. "Because I've seen that exact story more times than I can count." His voice became serious. "Come see me tomorrow. Bring every property document you have. And Richard, yes, until we talk, don't sign a single piece of paper." The following afternoon, I walked into George's office carrying a small file box. He spent nearly an hour reviewing everything. Then he leaned back in his chair. "Your cottage is completely debt-free. That's right. And you intend to leave it to your grandchildren someday?" He nodded. "Then I think I should show you something." He opened a drawer and removed a thick folder. Across the front were 4 words, "Family Cottage Protection Trust." I looked at him. "What exactly is that?" George smiled. "It's the reason your son-in-law can never use this property, if you decide to protect it before he asks again." I looked at the folder for several moments before speaking. "A trust?" George nodded. "It's one of the safest ways to preserve a family property." "What does it actually do?" "It separates ownership from individual financial problems." I leaned forward. "So if someone wanted to use the cottage as collateral, they couldn't?" "Not without violating the trust." I slowly smiled. Patricia would have loved that answer. George opened the folder. "This isn't about keeping your daughter out. It's about protecting the property for every generation." He slid a diagram across the desk. "The cottage stays in the trust. You remain in complete control. You decide who uses it. You pay the taxes. You maintain it. And when you're gone, my grandchildren, they become the beneficiaries. What about Melissa? She can enjoy it, but she can't mortgage it, sell it, or use it as loan security." Exactly what Patricia would have wanted. I spent nearly 2 hours reviewing every document. There were no hidden clauses, no complicated conditions, just one clear purpose: keep the cottage in the family. When I left George's office, I didn't drive home immediately. Instead, I drove to the lake. The sun was beginning to set. Orange light reflected across the calm water. I walked slowly down the old dock. Every board beneath my feet held a memory. Patricia reading novels in the hammock. Melissa learning to paddle the canoe. The grandchildren chasing frogs near the reeds. This place had survived storms, floods, harsh winters. I wasn't about to let one business deal become the biggest threat it had ever faced. The next morning I signed the trust documents. George notarized every page. When he handed me the final copy, he smiled. "Congratulations." "For what?" "You've just protected 41 years of family history." I tucked the documents safely into my briefcase. That evening my phone rang. "Ryan." "Hello, I've got great news." "Oh, the bank loved the proposal." "That's good. They just need one final confirmation." I already knew what was coming. "So, have you had a chance to think about using the cottage?" "I have. And I've made my decision." There was complete silence. Then he laughed confidently. "I knew you would." "No. I've decided the cottage will never be used as collateral." His laughter stopped. "What? It isn't available? You haven't even seen the paperwork?" "I don't need to. This isn't about paperwork. It's about protecting something your mother-in-law and I spent a lifetime building." His voice became sharper. "Richard, you're letting emotions get in the way." "No. I'm letting experience guide me." He sighed. "You know this could change our future." I answered quietly. It already has. He sounded confused. What does that mean? It means the cottage can never be pledged for anyone's loan. Another long silence. Then he asked the question I'd been expecting. What exactly did you do? I looked out across the lake through my living room window. The evening breeze moved gently across the water. Then I answered. I made sure the decision is no longer mine alone. Ryan didn't call again that night, or the next. For nearly a week I heard nothing from him. I assumed he was angry. I was only half right. The following Sunday, Melissa came to the cottage by herself. She looked exhausted. There were dark circles beneath her eyes. As soon as she stepped onto the porch, I knew something had happened. Where are the kids? At my sister's. And Ryan? She took a slow breath. Working. I nodded toward the rocking chair Patricia used to love. Sit. For several minutes we watched the lake without speaking. Finally, Melissa broke the silence. You put the cottage in a trust. It wasn't a question. George had been right. Ryan had found out. Yes. She looked down at her hands. He was furious. I'm sorry to hear that. He said you embarrassed him. I didn't do it to embarrass him. I know. She looked up. He said you don't trust him. I answered honestly. This isn't about trust. It's about responsibility. She nodded slowly. I told him that. My eyebrows lifted. You did. She smiled weakly. I reminded him the cottage belonged to Mom long before it belonged to either of us. For the first time in days, I felt hopeful. Maybe she understood. Then she quietly reached into her purse. I found something. She handed me a folded document. It was a copy of Ryan's business loan application. Where did you get this? He left it on his desk. I unfolded the pages. Halfway through, one sentence caught my attention. Additional collateral pending family approval. That wasn't unusual. The next page was. It listed the estimated value of my cottage. Not $2 million. Almost $3 million. I frowned. Ryan had told me the bank only needed a little extra security. According to these papers, the cottage represented nearly 70% of the loan guarantee. I looked at Melissa. Did you know the numbers were this high? She slowly shook her head. He told me it was only temporary. I continued reading. Then I reached the final page. My heart sank. There were 3 possible outcomes if the company failed. The first involved refinancing. The second involved restructuring. The third read, collateral liquidation subject to lender approval. In plain English, the bank could sell my cottage. Melissa covered her face. I'm so sorry, Dad. You don't have anything to apologize for. I should have asked more questions. We all should have. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was George. I answered immediately. Richard, I've just received a call from a commercial lawyer I know. What about? He represents Ryan's lender. I straightened in my chair. And they've been informed the cottage is no longer available. I expected that. There was another request. What request? They asked whether you'd consider removing the property from the trust. I laughed quietly. They actually asked that? Yes. And Richard. George paused. They sounded desperate. After the call ended, I looked back at Melissa. She was staring across the lake. I don't think the business is doing as well as Ryan says. Neither did I. That evening, just after sunset, a black pickup truck pulled into my driveway. Ryan stepped out. He wasn't smiling this time. He walked to the porch, stopped a few feet away, and looked directly at me. I need to ask you something. What is it? His voice was calm. Too calm. If I show you the truth about my company, will you at least reconsider the trust? I looked at Ryan for several seconds before answering. If showing me the truth means asking me to risk the cottage, my answer is still no. He nodded. I understand. For the first time since this all began, he sounded tired. Not angry, just exhausted. Can I at least explain? I stepped aside. Come in. Melissa quietly made coffee while Ryan placed a thick folder on the kitchen table. No sales pitch, no confident smile, just paperwork. I should have shown you this weeks ago. I opened the folder. Inside were financial statements, bank notices, project reports, cash flow summaries. George had been right. The company wasn't struggling because of one delayed project. It had been losing money for nearly 18 months. Why didn't you tell Melissa? Ryan stared at the table. I kept thinking the next contract would fix everything. And when it didn't, I borrowed more, then even more. Melissa's eyes filled with tears. You told me business was booming. I was ashamed. He wasn't looking at either of us anymore. I thought if I landed one big contract, I'd pay everyone back before anyone knew. I slowly closed the folder. So the cottage wasn't just extra security. He shook his head. No. It was my last chance. The room became quiet. After a long silence, I stood and walked toward the living room. On the fireplace sat Patricia's photograph. I picked it up, smiled, then turned back toward Ryan. "You know why your mother-in-law loved this place?" He quietly shook his head. "Because she believed memories should never be used to pay debts." I carefully placed the photograph back on the mantel. "That's why the trust stays." Ryan nodded. "I understand. I really do." Then he reached into his briefcase one last time. "I brought something else." It was a typed letter. A resignation. He had agreed to step down as president of his company. "I've already spoken to my business partner. We're bringing in someone with more experience." I also listed my truck, my boat, and our vacation condo for sale. Melissa looked at him in surprise. "You did? They're my mistakes. They shouldn't cost your family their future." For the first time, I believed he meant it. The following months weren't easy. Ryan sold nearly everything he personally owned. He negotiated with creditors, reduced the company's debt, accepted that rebuilding trust would take longer than rebuilding a business. One Saturday afternoon, almost a year later, the entire family gathered at the cottage. The grandchildren were laughing on the dock. Melissa was helping prepare lunch. Ryan was repairing the old wooden fence without anyone asking him to. As I watched him work, George walked over carrying 2 fishing rods. "You know," he said quietly, "that trust probably saved this place." I smiled. "It did more than that. It saved our family from making one terrible decision." That evening, as the sun disappeared behind Lake Simcoe, I unlocked the small cabinet where Patricia's notebook was stored. I read the final page one more time. "Richard, if the cottage is still standing years after I'm gone, it means you remembered that some things are worth protecting, even when people you love don't understand why." I closed the notebook and looked out across the calm water. Ryan had finally learned that a business can be rebuilt. Money can be earned again. But once a family's memories are lost, no loan, no investment, and no amount of success can ever buy them back. That was the real inheritance Patricia left all of us. And because of one difficult decision, our grandchildren will someday stand on this same dock, watch the same sunset, and make memories of their own.